Welcome back to the Miami-Dade College Journalism Speaker Series. I'm your host, Izzy Galita, filling in for Manolo Barco. Today, I'm joined by WLRN investigative reporter, Daniel Rivero. Daniel, thank you for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
All right, awesome. So Daniel, let's get right into it. So I understand that you were raised by Cuban parents in Washington, D.C., and at some point in your life, you made the move here to Miami. So can you talk to us a little bit about, moving here to Miami and a little bit about your early life, what that was like?
Yeah, so I grew up in D.C., or just outside D.C., and which is very different than Miami, but it was very multicultural. Like, my neighbors, friends were from all over the world, outside of this hemisphere, which is different than Miami. But my dad did work for Radio Martí, which is the U.S. government's broadcast arm into Cuba. So a lot of his coworkers and colleagues were Cubans. Our family friends were Cubans. So we had, within the Washington, D.C. area, like a Cuban circle, and I was exposed to a lot of politics, and many of our family friends were former political prisoners, and the weight of their stories and the background of all that kind of weighed on me. And when I moved to Miami, it was a relatively easy transition for that reason, I think.
Yeah. How old were you when you moved to Miami?
I was 12.
And I'm assuming that you must have moved with your entire family and everything.
Yeah.
Would you say that, I guess living in D.C., growing up there, would you say maybe sparks started to form for journalism? Like, you were kind of surrounded by politics, and that's a little bit of what you do now, or most of what you do now.
I think being in D.C. was, it was just background. But more than anything, I think it was just spending time with family and friend gatherings and just hearing talk about current events and politics. It was never something that I felt like was separated from my real life. It was always part of what we talked about at the kitchen table. Okay. So I think I didn't plan to go into journalism, but it kind of made sense once I did. Yeah.
So what kind of was your plan before settling on journalism? Because I know you graduated from FIU with bachelor's degree in English and literature. And I also know you attended Miami-Dade College. So can you talk to us a little bit about that experience and kind of what brought you to journalism?
So I graduated, I didn't know what I wanted to do. I always knew I loved reading. I would read anything you gave me, and I was good at writing, but I didn't know to what end, like what I wanted to do. So I said, let me do English, and there's a lot of places I can go from having an English degree. It's just reading, analysis, synthesis. I thought at some point I was going to be a lawyer, so I started studying for the LSAT, and I actually decided I didn't want to be a lawyer. And then I actually made a cold call to my current employer, WLRN, a cold email, and said, hey, I'm interested in coming in and seeing what I can do. And then they answered and kind of let me in the door. And that was the start of my journalism career, which is wild. But that was right after I graduated FIU.
What do you think kind of inspired you to cold call WLRN? Was it just, you were looking for work? Was there maybe somebody made a suggestion to you?
I was working another job, a part-time job close by, and I would listen to WLRN, and then every day on the drive home, I would drive past the studio, and then it was just like, I kept driving past it every day while I was listening to it, and I was like, man, like, I kind of would like to do something there, because I like what they do. Like, I engaged with it when I was in my car, and I was lucky in a way, because when I made that cold email, it was in the middle of the Arab Spring, which is all the uprisings in the Middle East and North Africa. And they were hungry for like a young person who knew social media. That was the big story at the time of, social media can change the world. And that was more or less the pitch I gave them. I was like, if you hire me, I can, get you on Facebook and Twitter and, get you in on the new tech that was emerging. And that was really my foot in the door. It was just a crazy opportunity.
Yeah. So what kind of, you got started in social media, and then at some point you became an investigative reporter, obviously what you're doing now. Right. So how did that transition become? Because those are two, I feel like, completely different things.
Yeah. Well, after I was at WLRN for about 2 years, I went to Fusion, which was this cable station started by Univision and ABC News. And immediately they made me into a TV producer, and I was writing scripts. They thought I was a better writer than social media, so I just jumped on it. And the thing that really set my career off in a different path, I think, was there was the what happened in Ferguson, Missouri in 2014, where there was a police officer shot and killed teenager Michael Brown. There was a huge uprising. It was a national, international story about police violence and what the court system was doing and whatnot. So in the middle of that, my job sent me to Ferguson, and then I spent really a couple weeks there just engulfed in it and living that really world-changing experience. I think we're still in the aftermath of that directly. But once I was there and living through that, it made me want to look deeper, like at the root causes of a lot of the tensions that were rising to the surface. And then that led me to start doing some early investigative reporting and really looking into like the criminal justice system and trying to dig deeper than surface level. And then it kind of rolled on from there.
Yeah. So when you started as, investigative reporting about everything that happened in Ferguson, was it kind of like something you were appointed to? Did you make a suggestion to your employers? You're kind of like, I'd really be interested in doing this, or, they've seen that maybe you were in the field and, you did some good?
It was the first time I was sent out to do field
Something
reporting
like that.
of that
Right.
kind, but I had been covering the criminal justice system as a reporter for like our website. I was writing things for our website
Right.
and producing some TV segments. So it wasn't that crazy. But really it was one story. Like I put out some records requests and it got back some records that turned into a really good story for us that was made a big splash. I remember it was cited in President Obama's report on 21st century policing, and it was crazy to see my reporting, in a presidential report. And then I just got kind of addicted. I was like, well, let me just keep doing investigative journalism and putting records requests and trying to, figure out what's really going on in a lot of situations. It's been really gratifying.
That's awesome, yeah. And going back to Fusion TV really quickly, or Fusion, how did your experience there kind of play into maybe what you're doing now at WLRN?
I think it was an incredible place to learn on the job. They hired a lot of very young people, early career people, and in a lot of ways gave us a lot of freedom to just figure out what we were good at, what we wanted to do. And I really appreciated it. I mean, by the end, I was working on a documentary team, producing hour-long documentaries, going out on shoots across the country, learning the technical part of like setting up a shoot, doing things like that, but also all the groundwork to get you there. Like, how do you set up the questions for the interview? What kind of research do you need to do? And things like that. So it really set me up for the next chapter, which was coming back to public radio.
That's awesome. We'll be right back after a quick break.
I'm Danny Rivero, an investigative reporter at WLRN. And I want to tell you about a case of alleged state censorship of textbooks in Florida universities that a professor told me has never happened in U.S. history.
Now we're back with the MDC Journalism Speaker Series. So Daniel, I wanted to ask you, at WLRN, or really any news station that you've worked at, what would you say are some of the more compelling stories that you've been able to work on? And do you have any favorites?
Oh, wow. I think any story where you get to just spend time with people are the funnest stories to do. And that can be anything from following a sports player to following someone's job for the day, or some reporting I've done on immigration where you just get to be a fly on the wall and spend time inside someone's home and just observe and like be there with kids playing and whatnot. It's just like a very it's a livening experience to witness things firsthand like that. And then there's moments of unrest, protest, things like that, where your adrenaline kind of just gets pumping. It can be very exhilarating, and it's important to document a lot of those things. And then there's some of the reporting I've done that's really brought about change, and some of that reporting, just by the nature of it, because you're dealing with a lot of records and things like that, sometimes it's a lot more like sitting at a desk and just like analyzing records and trying to cross your T's and dot your I's and do one of those boards where you're like have pictures and you draw the lines and everything. And that's a meticulous process, but when you get a story that really yields something important that has real ripple effects in the community, it's incredibly gratifying. So we've seen some reporting locally do that.
Yeah. Would you say, I guess, those kind of change-making stories, would those be kind of your favorites? And is there any that come to mind in that regard?
Yeah. I think they are the favorites in terms of impact because every journalist wants to make an impact in the world.
Right.
But they come usually through other kinds of reporting. When you do other kind of day-to-day reporting, especially on a certain topic for long enough, then you have people coming to you and telling you things about like this thing you've been reporting on, like you need to look into this side, and they give you kind of guidance on it. And so every once in a while you'll get it, and you'll find the right thing. So one of the stories that from a few years ago that stands out is we did some reporting on the now former city manager of the city of Miami, Art Noriega, who his office was contracting directly with his wife's company, including to remodel his own office. And we found a lot of money from his office being spent at his wife's company very directly. And we did that reporting, and it really implemented a sweeping change in the city. One of the commissioners said, we need an independent inspector general to investigate things like this and whatnot. And then voters passed it with like almost 80% of the vote. So now the city of Miami has it. I don't think we would have something like that if it wasn't for our reporting pushing it over the edge.
Yeah. And I'm sure that's a gratifying feeling. Like, it's
it
just
is.
To be able to make that change. Another thing I'm curious about is your investigative process, right? I feel like, as a student journalist, I kind of, I've kind of made my own way of going about things. Like maybe I try to use Google as my best friend, like find out everything I can first about something, and then, I want to find out who can I talk to that can give me more about this.
Right.
But as a professional journalist, what would you say is your process and, when you first get an assignment and you're like, this is something you have to look into? Like, what do you kind of do?
I think it depends how much time you have. I mean, the way I look at it, every story you do is an investigation. It's just how much time do you have?
Right.
Sometimes the turnaround is an hour, so it's like, what can you investigate in an hour? But if you're working on something where you have a couple months to do it, maybe slowly in between other tasks, then you can really get meticulous. But the most important thing for like really deep dive reporting, I think, is often just understanding the structure of the different systems that we're reporting on. So if I'm investigating a public agency, for example, like one of the first things I'll request is the organizational chart. Like, how does this organization actually work? Who reports to who?
Yeah.
And then once you have that, then you know who's sending the emails to who, and like what communication chains you can try to get through public records. And then So, but it's very meticulous. Some of it is just you got to go a few layers deeper than Google, and I think AI I have found is not adequate at all for investigative reporting because it doesn't even pull from the resources that you need to access in order to get the information that you need. I use it as a research tool sometimes, but like very early in the process. You just need to find like where the databases are, who the right people are.
Like it kind of gives you a general idea of like, maybe what's to, I guess, look at, but not the actual information itself, so to say.
Yeah, and then you have to be careful because like, sometimes I'll Google something, like just searching for what I can find on something, and then it starts giving me information, but it's citing my own reporting.
Oh.
So it's citing myself. So if I'm looking for information that hasn't been reported yet, well, there's nothing for it to cite.
Yeah.
So you have to go and figure out, you can go into the guts of the system and figure out how it actually works so you can get the answers that you're looking for. Because it's not something that like AI is going to know.
Yeah. A lot of people think that, it's been expressed to me, maybe people that are not working in journalism, that it might have like a threat on, I guess, the future of journalism. But I always try to tell people that like, I feel like I can't write feature stories or things like that. Like those more, like you said, like being a fly on the wall in somebody's house and you learn their story.
Right.
I feel like it's not, it just can't replace that, you know what I mean? Humans like talking to humans. I just want to know, what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah.
Do you think it poses a threat in any way?
I mean, AI does pose a threat to a lot of jobs in a way, but I do think journalism in some form or another is just always going to be here. Even with the shifting landscape, people, vloggers, vlogging about things, there's a lot more blogs, microblogging. It's become more democratized, but it's not going anywhere. And I don't think AI can replace like actually bearing witness to something.
Yeah.
because when you witness something or when you interview someone that directly witnessed something and it like triggers them emotionally or something, that triggers something emotional in us and in the audience. You can't replicate that with AI. Like, we're humans, and humans are social creatures, and we care about interacting with other people. And like, there's only so much an algorithm can do, and there's things that only humans can do. So for that reason, I think journalism might change because of it, but it's always going to be here.
Yeah, absolutely. And you talked about your quickest turnaround on stories, like you've had maybe only an hour to turn around a story. How do you kind of go about that when you have such a short time frame?
I mean, if your deadline is an hour, then you need to just get like the bare bones, what you can possibly get. Like the top line information, if there's a quote, like get the quote, put it in the right place. But you're never going to get everything and all the background and history and everything in a 1 hour deadline. Yeah. Which is why breaking news a lot of times is like, this is a developing story. You just can't do that. But there is, in order to do the longer like feature and investigative reporting stories, like I do think you need to do a lot of the quick turn, like just learn how to like craft a basic story quickly and like understand the kind of the process of just publishing and getting something publish worthy. A lot of times in repetition, so that you can expand it and make it deeper and then get into the different layers and nuances of different stories. Yeah.
We'll be right back after a quick break.
Today's guest is going to be Danny Rivero. He's an investigative reporter for WLRN, the public radio station in Miami.
The series actually started from a series of observations I had and other people in the newsroom had, where it seemed at some point that every time we were talking about something like our local government was trying to do in Miami-Dade County or the city of Miami or Miami Beach, whoever, it seemed like almost every time there was efforts to do something locally, a couple of months later, the state would do something to shoot it down and make all that effort, all the debate and everything irrelevant.
And we're back after a short break with the Journalism Speaker Series. So, Daniel, this week I know that the Pulse nightclub in Orlando was demolished. And I know that's something that you covered when the shooting happened in 2016. Can you talk to us about the experience of covering that, such a tragedy, and what you had to do there?
Honestly, covering that story was one of the hardest things I've ever had to cover, because a pretty good friend of mine was actually there and was one of the people murdered. And I didn't know that until I was actually up in Orlando. So that was a really incredibly tough story, as you can imagine. It was just a city full of grief. And then, and then I learned that my friend Jerry Wright was among the missing people. And then, it was like the day after I got there, we got the actual confirmation that he was one of the ones that passed. And it was, it was terrible. Professionally, it was also a reminder that, we live in the world that we report on. You can't always separate yourself from a story. We live in the place that we report on, and sometimes those lines get totally blurred, and that's okay.
You talked to me right now during the break. We talked about you covering the Surfside condominium collapse, and as somebody who's kind of had to sit through these tragedies, and like you kind of lived that one as well. How do you deal with it? Once you're done reporting, when you go back home, like how do you unwind?
The Surfside condo collapse was another really hard story to report on. I mean, my editor called me at about 4 a.m. and said, "Danny, something happened. We need you to get up there." And I got there at 5 a.m, and we didn't know what was going on. We just saw the headline of, partial building collapse, and then because I know the area, like me and my colleague ran through a hole in the fence and went to the beach side, and then like as the sun was rising, we actually saw the building, and we were like just in shock. Because until then we had no visuals. And I spent all day talking to people that had missing people that narrowly escaped death and whatnot, and it was an incredible, terrible experience, and you know, it just reminds you like life is delicate, and it's one of the weirdest and best things about being a journalist is having a front row seat to a lot of what affects everyone, and you know, in terms of what do I do to unwind, I mean, you got to have your hobbies. Like, I go ride bike, you know, I go on a run, I read. I got into fishing for a little bit, but not that much anymore, you know. Yeah, you got to watch movies, listen to music, like, you just live your normal life.
Yeah,
but then we have a part of our life that's just can be very intense sometimes.
Yeah.
It's not always like that, but it can be.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. You just got to stay engaged with the world. You know, you got to remind yourself maybe you're more than just your job, you know, not to try to get tunnel visions.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's very important. Like, at the same time, I think it's a superpower for a journalist is the ability to be like passionate and hyper focused on a topic that you're passionate about, and the ability to do that for work, it's incredible. It's what makes this job like the best job in the world. But you need to step away from it sometimes because you can burn yourself out. You need to go to the beach and go for a swim and just remember, you know, that there's things outside of journalism too.
One thing I'm curious about as far as your coverage goes, you know, you've done radio, you do digital. Is there what's kind of the difference between that, and maybe do you have a preference in terms of what you'd like to cover or how you like to cover it?
Yeah, I think they're very different mediums. I love radio as a medium because there's something so engaging about the spoken voice. It's the oldest form of storytelling, and radio is just a more polished version of like ancient storytelling.
Yeah.
And when you do it effectively, you can captivate people. You know, it's not video, no disrespect to video, but it can be a very passive thing. Like, you watch the video and it gives you the visual, it gives you the audio, like you don't have to think about it that much.
Yeah.
But when you're actually engaged in a radio story, you can kind of just zone out. And that's because your brain is working.
Yeah.
And you're like actually engaging with it so much in a way that sometimes is even deeper than print. You can convey more information in print, but you can't zone out. You can't just like lose yourself in it.
Yeah.
So I really like the medium of audio.
Yeah, and what you said about zoning out, that's not something I've ever considered, but it's definitely something I do a lot. I listen to WLRN a lot. My mom does as well. I kind of like, we grew up with her playing it on the radio, and I feel like I can maybe attribute my interest in journalism to that because it was just kind of in the background almost. Like, maybe if I wasn't paying attention, I had an understanding of what was going on in the world. You know what I mean?
Right.
Because it kind of just blended in with everything else that was going on. And sometimes when I'm driving, like, I'm listening, and it's like it's like a stream coming in my ear, like an information stream. You know.
Right.
Just, it's a lot more engaging than like, well, I enjoy print because it's what I do.
No, I love print too. You can do more in some ways in print, but you know, we have what we call like driveway moments in radio where like you get to where you're going, but what's going on in the radio is so captivating and you're so drawn in, like you'll just sit in your car zoned out for a few minutes and let the segment finish because you don't want to get up. You can't get up.
Yeah.
And there's not many mediums that captivate someone like that.
Yeah.
And creating it is, you know, it's just a pleasure.
Yeah. You know, a lot of young journalists in a lot of universities around the country, they have radio stations that they participate in. They have obviously print media, like here at the Reporter.
Mm-hmm.
I'm curious, what advice would you give to a student journalist who's just starting out? Like maybe something you wish that you knew when you were just starting out in the field.
I wish I got into radio earlier, to be honest. I mean, I came to Miami-Dade College. I don't even know if there's a radio station or something.
We have podcasts, but I don't think radio stations.
But I think just whatever you're like passionate about, whatever topic that is. For some people it's sports, for some people it's fashion, for some people it's politics, for some people it's architecture. Like, focus on that thing. Like, if you become like a dedicated, passionate person that has a deep understanding of these topics, that means you can be an incredible standout reporter in that topic. But like you have to open your mind to like other fields of interest. You know, journalism itself is not a beat.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
but you, like give yourself the room to think about what you can really be passionate about, and then you can use that as a pathway to be really good at journalism because you're already passionate about it. So
Yeah.
report on it.
Absolutely, yeah. Well, Daniel, thank you so much for joining us for the Journalism Speaker Series today. I really appreciate it. It's nice talking with you.
Nice talking to you.
Yeah. See you guys at the next episode of the MDC Journalism Speaker Series.